Welcome to another episode of this show starring myself and Leonardo Salvaggio. Leo, we took a break for a little while. How's everything going?
Well, as everything is going quite well, quite regular, and I was really looking forward to this new episode of our regular shows, meetings, videos, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, I don't even know what to call these anymore. I call them collab sessions. But with us today is a special guest, a guy I've known for years, has really risen in the ranks. Proud of the work that he's done over the years, which is exceptional. He's the co-host of the Beyond Ground Zero podcast, which is another 9/11 podcast we desperately need in this day and age because it's such a dying topic. Sean Russell. Sean, my man, what's up, pal?
Hey, Adam, Leo, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah,
It's early in the morning over here. It's very dark and cold, but I'm glad to be in attendance and looking forward to whatever you guys want to break down today.
Yeah, so this is where myself and Leo, we usually talk about, various different things. We talked about Bojinka plot, the intelligence failures leading up to it, um, the current state of the truth movement, which was probably one of my favorite subjects because we spoke about so many people. And today, Leo and I wanted to talk about a guy who's been in the news recently regarding what has been happening in the last 3 months, which is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind 9/11, and the Guantanamo trials, which are basically going back and forth. Florida Bulldog, Law Dragon have been just unceasing in their reports, Leo and Sean, regarding Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and the prosecution, along with the defense of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the other three that are involved, because Ramzi bin al Shib has been declared mentally incompetent. He's not charged. And Omar al Baluchi, the cousin of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, is not involved in this plea deal where they're going to take the death penalty off the table in return for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the other three to plead guilty to 9/11 attacks. There's a problem here, and that is because the defense are basically agreeing to this. The prosecution is saying no, and the Secretary of Defense is basically saying we're going to overrule this. We want a trial. The judge, Judge McCall, Navy McCall, is basically saying no. I'm overseeing Austin's deal, and now we're stuck in the middle. We don't know where we're going from here. But the man in the middle is the man that barely anyone knows about anymore, which is surprising to me, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Leo, what's on the agenda?
Well, I think that we should start from assessing who this person is, because I don't think that like the general public knows about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed because they all blame it on Osama bin Laden. But Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had a big role in this attack that is 9/11 we're talking about, because he's actually the mastermind. He's the person who proposed bin Laden to carry out an attack on the American soil using civil airplanes as weapons. So just let's recap his life. He was born in Pakistan in 1965 and joined the Muslim Brotherhood, if I remember well, when he was around 16. So he has been a long time Islamic militant. And the funny thing is that what people usually ignore or don't think of is that after taking high school in Kuwait, he went to the United States.
Mm.
So he got a degree in engineering in North Carolina. And after that, he moved back to Pakistan because, as we all know, back then the USSR had invaded Afghanistan. Therefore, he wanted to join the Mujahideens and have a part in the resistance. So I think that what is important to remember is that the Americans were after him since the 90s because he was connected to the first attack on the World Trade Center in 93 because he was the uncle of Ramzi Youssef, who's actually the person who carried out the attack in 93. One thing that I think is important to remember is that we say uncle and we think of somebody who's much older. Actually, he was 2 years older than Ramzi Youssef because the Arabic society, probably families are much bigger. They have much more children than in the Western countries. Therefore, it's not that uncommon to have a nephew in this case who's 2 years younger than you are. And so after the attack in 93, he started planning big attacks using airplanes. And 9/11 is not the first one, because as you've mentioned in the outset, the first attack that they were planning was called Bojinka. And the scope of it was to have airplanes exploding in midair pretty much everywhere in the world. So after that, after the Bojinka plot was stopped because one of their associate was caught in the Philippines because one of the devices exploded while it was building it. It came to Bin Laden with the idea of 9/11, and the first idea of 9/11 was like crazy, because we already saw how difficult it was, or how complex it was to hijack 4 planes. But his first plan was to hijack 10 planes and have multiple attacks on both the east and the west coast. So the original plan also included crashing airplanes into the CIA headquarters in Langley, and also high-rise buildings in LA and other buildings that don't come to my mind right now. And the important thing here is that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed also wanted a big role for himself, because he wanted to be the pilot. He wanted to land one of the planes in American airport, which is not specified anywhere, if I remember well. And he wanted to then call the media and address the nation, and saying, I want something like blaming the US government for their support to Israel. Of course, they had to scale this down. Because it would have been impossible to carry out such a big attack. So what happened is that then he proposed Bin Laden what we now know as 9/11. And this is the story in a nutshell of what happened before 9/11 with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Yes, interesting thing about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is that he seemed to be more of a contract killer than he was an Islamic militant. He was born in Baluchistan, allegedly. He comes from a very Sunni family, basically on the border of Baluchistan and Pakistan, which is known as a gun running area during the Cold War, the period of the Cold War, where people were drug traders that would come from the Helmand province and then trade, heroin, Guja heroin, for weapons to be used against the Russians, as you said, during the height of the Cold War, the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. And in Boers is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed also went to Afghanistan, Pakistan, to basically become a member of Abdul Rasul Sayyaf's media arm, where he basically would be in cahoots with some of the more notable warlords during that time, which led him to become familiar with bin Laden's name, because bin Laden had come from Saudi royal wealth. He comes from the Saudi bin Laden group, and they basically were known in Pakistan, Afghanistan during the height of the war, because you have this millionaire who basically, lives in a cage with these fighters, which is unheard of, considering the amount of these very ego-vain warlords in Afghanistan. That's the reason why they never really worked with each other. People like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, Rabbani in Afghanistan, these were all people that were big-time people. Jalaluddin Haqqani. These are very big people that have thousands of fighters at the helms, and the CIA and British MI6 and other intelligence were none too hesitant in sharing information and also training these people to fight against the Soviets. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed went to the United States, like you said, to study engineering, and he was actually picked on. There's stories I've read, from what's it called, that Terry McDermott, that I read about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, where I interviewed him about his book. Yeah, The Hunt for Khalid Sheikh. That's a great book, by the way. People don't know.
It is.
Where they would throw the shoes of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, his Muslim brethren, during morning prayers into the river. And this is where he got his hatred for the United States from. And he went back to Pakistan. And this is where, he teams up with Ramzi Youssef. Later on, they go to the Philippines and they plot the Bojinka plot. And they're plotting all the time during the late 1990s. In fact, there's a story that after the 93 bombing, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was in Qatar and he was surrounded by the FBI and CIA and Qatari intelligence who he had a contact with, told him that he could escape using a passport that was made for him, and he escapes. And allegedly, according to New York Times, this is not alleged, it's actually to New York Times, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed traveled even to Israel, and also traveled to the Philippines, traveled to Indonesia, and this guy was everywhere. Much like Ramzi Youssef, these guys are basically not so much in the way of religious militants, but basically, independent contractors. They weren't with any particular group. Ramzi Youssef wasn't with Al Qaeda. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed wasn't with Al Qaeda till later. And basically, but people within Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, Jemaah Islamiyah in Indonesia, and Al Qaeda in Afghanistan knew about these people, and basically had these people come and train with Al Qaeda affiliates in the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and Afghanistan. So this guy is basically everywhere. But what he doesn't have is money, and he needs money for these operations, which leads into what Leo's point was regarding Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 9/11 attacks after Bojinka. Now, Bojinka was a not talked about operation. To me, this is one of my favorite points of history, because if Bojinka would have been successful, it would have been worse. 9/11 would have been much worse than 9/11, because you have 10 airplanes and then another 10 airplanes that were going to be manually hijacked. There was going to be 10 airplanes with bombs in them, and 10 planes that basically were going to be manually hijacked and crashed everywhere, like Leo said, into high-rise buildings in the United States. One of them being the Sears Tower, the Golden Gate Bridge, the World Trade Center, Pentagon, the Empire State Building. I mean, when Khalid Sheikh Mohammed went to Bin Laden in 1999 and proposed this idea, allegedly, according to sources that we know of now, Bin Laden said it's too extravagant, and he thought Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, I'm glad you brought that up, Leo, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was going to be the pilot. He was going to kill all the men in the plane, leave the women and children alone, land the plane, and give this ridiculous speech about why this happened. And I thought, like Bin Laden, I would have said, you're ridiculous. No, we're going to shorten it to 4 airplanes. What's interesting about this is that there was one target that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed brought to Bin Laden, and this always stuck with me, Leo and Sean. And Sean, I want to get your thoughts on this too regarding Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. One of the targets was a nuclear facility. I don't know where it was, but according to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi bin al-Shib, before they were caught, because they were interviewed by Yosri Fuda at Al Jazeera, before they were tortured. Supposedly, bin Laden rejected the idea because of, quote, it would have been too hectic. Isn't that the whole point? Is to bring about, destruction and fear into the United States, where it would hurt the economy and destroy the willpower of the United States. That always stuck with me as to why. I thought that was a great idea. If you're going to actually bring about a terrorist operation where you're going to paralyze the economy in the United States and bring about total fear and debasement to the American mindset, I would be attacking nuclear facilities, water treatment plants, dams, and all that, bridges and stuff like that. That's why I always go back to the original landmarks plot, El Said Nosair, where they were going to bomb the Washington Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge. Jacob Javits said that would have been a lot more destructive than attacking the World Trade Center. World Trade Center did its job because everybody sees these 2 buildings crashed out. It destroys the willpower of the United States, which it did. But what it didn't do was destroy the resolve of revenge. And in order to do that, you got to hurt the economy. Sean, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has always been somebody that you have been brought up over the years, nefarious individual. And what are your thoughts on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed?
Well, just as you guys, the first thing that really pops into mind is the fact that is the connection with the 1993 attack and the Bojinka plot, which was failed. Something that I find really fascinating about this Bojinka connection, and I sort of look at KSM and his nephew Ramzi as being almost interchangeable. I think there's a little bit of a debate out there about who out of the 2 of them was the mastermind. It's a little bit unclear who was the one who actually came up with these ideas. Were they just doing it together? Did they both have similar ideas? Anyway, they both have very interesting and confusing, shady backgrounds. But with this Bojinka idea, I'm always looking at this thing as what's practical, and I think that's what comes back to this topic about what would someone like an Osama bin Laden, a financier, think about it, because it's his money. What's his money going towards? And the original Bojinka idea would have been so much more complicated. Now, Leo already mentioned about how Bojinka came unraveled because the operatives made mistakes. And that goes along with the pattern that we saw from Ramzi Youssef himself, which is a history of basically failed plots. His most successful operation is the one that he's like least connected to, which was the Reza Shrine bombing in Iran, which actually killed mostly Shia. And he was sort of like contracting that work out, I believe with MEK or some other group. And so he's like not exactly right up on it. And that's the most successful one. The ones that he's like got his hands on, his hands, that he gets his fingers blown off from mishandling explosives, and he almost loses an eye, and they're not successful. He doesn't bring down the World Trade Center. There's the story, there's a couple of versions of it about FBI is kind of mocking him in the helicopter ride past Manhattan, when they're saying, look, the towers are still there, Ramsey, right? And he says, well, they wouldn't be there if I'd had more money, more time, or some excuse, right? Maybe the bomb could have been bigger. Well, to do something like a 9/11 after the failed Bojinka plot, it's very, very strikingly similar. But there's an important difference, and that's there's no bombs. Bojinka was going to have a bunch of explosives. And so I look at this angle of it. What KSM and Yosef and their co-conspirators like Murad, they wanted to do planted explosives on multiple airlines. And so the idea was that you would have an operative go through the airport, get on the plane, set either a switch, a trigger device on the plane, then deboard the plane at its next stop, and then aboard another plane and repeat. And there would have to be multiple operatives doing this, because you're looking at something like 10 plus airliners at least. I look at it, I'm on the higher end with it. I think it was like dozens probably was what they wanted to do. But what that means is you have to have an operative who can get past security. You have to have an operative who's familiar with explosives. And then you also have to have several of this skilled operative to do it. And Murad and Yosef just kept messing up because they set their apartment on fire while they were trying to get ready for everything. Well, clearly, that is a little bit too complicated. Beyond the notions of, is it too much from bin Laden? Like, is it too deadly? Or beyond that, is it actually practical to do something like that? Since they were having a hard time with just one bomb maker. If they had two bomb makers and the Jaj was the other one and he gets sent to prison, they're down to just one bomb maker. It's Yosef. Murad clearly wasn't up to the skill level of Yosef, because Murad was, the learner in the equation. They didn't have, I don't know, a half dozen to a dozen guys who could do that. Get past security, plant a device, get past security again and do the same thing again. And this could be happening in Asia and in the United States. So instead, what they have is, okay, we take the explosive part out of it. And now all you have to do is get past security and seize the airplane. That's way less James Bond. It's way more, ground, boots on the ground. It's just basic. It's basic, classic air terrorism. And I think that switch from, no, let's not focus on planting complicated explosives. Let's just focus on, can we get a bunch of guys who are just dumb enough to do something like hijack a plane, and then get even less guys, even less than that, who are just dumb enough to kill themselves and hit a target for whatever the cause. And they don't have to have the expertise. I mean, a terrorist who can get past security multiple times, plant multiple devices, he's more valuable alive. But how many of them do you have? Whereas on the flip side, you can probably get a bunch of dupes who are expendable, and then you can accomplish something. You're going to have, 20 some operatives, just like you would have with Bojinka. You can't hit as many targets, but you can still accomplish it. And maybe it's ultimately cheaper, because if we're looking at this through the lens of what is contract terrorism, these guys are just going to do it for ideological purposes, especially the muscle. So you can make it more possible, make it more plausible. And apparently that worked. So that's one thing that I really come back to a lot, is why is it similar, but it's different? And I think it's because they realize that they just can't pull it off with the explosives.
Leo, going back to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed now in the late 1990s, he's in Afghanistan, situated with Bin Laden and Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is now all in on the planes operation known as the 9/11 attacks. He now needs money to conduct these operations, and he's going to get it from Bin Laden. Afterwards, Bin Laden tells Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to swear loyalty. He rejects it the first time, but does become its military commander, military operations manager, or whatever, director. Later on, he does swear by loyalty to Bin Laden. So Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is now situated in Afghanistan. The intelligence community are still after him. Leo, how is he evading escape, and what are your thoughts on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed from this point forward?
Well, let me add something to what Sean just said before answering your question. I think that from switching from Bojinka to what happened in 9/11, the level of expertise you would need is not bomb making, but flying airplanes. And flying airplanes is something legal that you can study without raising any suspicions. While, of course, if you're a bomb maker, sooner or later, someone is going to ask you, hey, what are you up to? So I'm totally with you with this reasoning that you've just explained. I also think that Bin Laden didn't want to strike power plants, nuclear power plants, because the defense would have been too high. And probably they would have raised red flags before, earlier than what happened with the World Trade Center. So let's go back to what happened in Afghanistan and Pakistan when Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was around in the 90s. I think that one thing that we also need to understand is that he had a big role also in financing the operation. Because when he was fighting the Soviets, one of the things that he did, and this partially answers your question, is running NGOs to raise money for the operation, like sugarcoating or whitewashing this money under the umbrella of doing something relevant for poor people. This is what a lot of NGOs do. And we also know that NGOs are also one of the ways that Al Qaeda used to fund the attacks of 9/11, and he will also had a key role in sending those money to the United States to the hijackers via another one of his nephews by the name of Ali Abdul Al Aziz. Is that correct? And of course,
Yes.
of course, is the first cousin of Ramzi Youssef. While in the 90s in Afghanistan, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed also tried to plot something, to design a plot to kill Bill Clinton and the Pope. But that was also discarded because of the high level of protection that these two key figures were getting from the Secret Service for the president, but also, of course, the military and so on. And let's not forget that some 15 years before, the Pope was shot by another Islamic terrorist by the name of Ali Agca. And I think that one other key point is that we also have to wonder what was the relationship between Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Osama bin Laden? Because, of course, both of them wanted to be the superstar of this all. Therefore, this might also be the reason why Osama bin Laden rejected the proposal with the 10 planes, with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed being the pilot and the key figure and the main actor of this all, because that would have overshadowed Osama bin Laden. And at the same time, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was never an Al-Qaeda member. He was an associate because he didn't want to play second fiddle to Osama bin Laden. And he managed to escape multiple times because at the end, he was, an associate of Al-Qaeda, and they were providing him shelter. And also they used the caves in Tora Bora multiple times, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does actually. He's a very slippery figure. In fact, which leads me to that question later on. That has connection with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, but the Secret Service, the services like the diplomatic security services, the FBI, the CIA, managed to capture very nefarious figures like Ramzi Youssef, Abu Zubaydah, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, but then can't extract and capture the most wanted man out of all this in Osama bin Laden. Instead, they just kill him. This would have been the bigger prize. And this is the reason why I never understood why they basically didn't just capture him, because he's 60-something years old with a limp. He's older, he's sicklier, he's less slippier than the other four. And I just don't know why they would kill him. Nevertheless, they do capture Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi bin al-Shib in Pakistan. First, they captured bin al-Shib, and then later on, they captured Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And there's a couple of stories, one by the Indian Times, one by Pakistan Press, about him staying with a family, and then his family was not there, and then they captured Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. There's another story that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was captured with his family, and they arrested everybody. And I don't know what particularly went down, specifically these stories. Nevertheless, he is captured, and he's rendered to a CIA black site. And then after being tortured at sites like Detention Site Green, Detention Site Blue, in various areas in Europe and Afghanistan, he's then transferred over finally to Guantanamo Bay Prison, where he's been there since 2003, I believe. Charges are that he's the alleged mastermind 9/11, yet they tortured him. Now, this is where it becomes really murky, both the two of you guys. I want to get your thoughts on this, both of you. For me, is that was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed the mastermind 9/11? I think he is. But there's always that lingering question, whether he is or isn't, because he was tortured. He acted. In other words, what I used to say in my previous videos, I say, even if he told the truth, flat out, that he was in the 93 bombing, he was involved with the Bojinka plot, that he was involved with 9/11 and various other plots, which I think he was. Can you really believe that? Because that's always the lingering question. Now, I'm not saying that the CIA did this on purpose, but they really ruined the chance of any type of trial date, because even with the military commissions, anything that's coerced by force or by threats of force cannot be admissible. Now, you can't say that the entire CIA didn't know this, because the CIA's liaison officers basically were warning the station chiefs like Richard Blee that you can't, and Blee left afterwards, and the other people that were there, I don't know their names, but they basically warned them, saying that, this information you're getting out of the EIT, which is Enhanced Interrogation Techniques, are basically going to become inadmissible in the future. But they did. But according to James Mitchell and Bruce Jessens, the two guys that were hired by the CIA to run these enhanced interrogation techniques, they basically said, we were just trying to get information about the next attack. And earlier this year, James Mitchell was testifying in Guantanamo. He basically said, no, I don't care about the 9/11 attacks. What? Really? Oh, okay. So we're talking about the future of attacks that you're trying to stop. Even if you did get that information, which they never did, and they lied about it, because the Senate report in 2007 that was released basically said that no information given by these people, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shib, Mustafa al-Sawi, and the rest of them, basically were information that was groundbreaking because the CIA knew this. So the FBI, they just didn't share with each other and wasn't acted upon. Other plots basically failed because of various reasons whatsoever, of lack of funding, or basically, some operatives dropped out or whatever, unforeseen things. Nevertheless, here you have Khalid Sheikh Mohammed captured, renditioned, tortured, and basically could be telling the truth, and no one's going to believe him. And now we have this trial that basically is in limbo. Leo, first let's go to Sean, then we'll go to Leo. Sean, what are your thoughts on that?
How can you trust what he says if he was tortured, right?
Yeah.
And didn't KSM also like admit to things that he couldn't possibly have been involved with under torture as well? So it's just a wash of admissions. They could have just been hitting him with 100 different questions, and that's at a certain point he just says yes, 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 because his brain breaks and he just admits to everything, right? If that was intentional, it would not shock me because I think that just smacks of tradecraft. That sounds like exactly like what somebody would do if they wanted to keep the button on something. Just like there might be an inclination to avoid having a trial. Same mentality, keep the button on it. What I find the most peculiar about the whole thing is, I don't think it's just like Taliban or Mujahideen organizations that would protect somebody like a KSM. There's this old notion that effectively all terrorism is either state condoned, state implemented, state sponsored. There could be some geopolitical motivation for like the Americans to not let 9/11 mess up what they do want in the Middle East. If they want to have wars in a certain way, there could be, well, maybe we need to make sure that Saudi Arabia doesn't get upset because of the oil market and things like this. That there could be somebody besides just Mujahideen organizations protecting someone like a KSM. And, like you mentioned already, Adam, it's very peculiar that KSM got into the state of Israel because they're supposed to be renowned for their security and their counterterrorism. Something like that is a peculiar item to stack up with all of this. And just to go along with what can you trust about what KSM tells people under duress? What can we trust about the histories of KSM and Yosef as well? Because there's disputes about when they're born, where they're born. They have this murky history that I haven't been able to pin it down myself. And, props to anybody who is able to iron it out better than myself, because I don't know what to believe about KSM's early life. He might as well only exist as an adult doing the things that he does, that he's famous for. The history is not as out in the open as what you can read about someone even like an Osama bin Laden, where the history is very clear, actually, if you want to pursue it. KSM, not so much. So he's a profoundly mysterious figure that if the intelligence agencies of perhaps multiple countries were not handling or were not attempting to mitigate, if he just somehow flew under everyone's radar, then that's an even more disturbing thought, because who's protecting anyone in this crazy world if he was not a known thing, and if he was not like Gublatin Hekmatar or even other Haqqani or other like sort of intelligence tainted organizations. If he wasn't something like that, then who in the world is protecting us? Because they got away with everything and they've succeeded in 9/11. It's very disturbing to stack up what appear to be the facts about KSM and then sort of ponder about what's the missing pieces.
Leo, what are your thoughts on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to this point?
Well, I think that while I'm totally with you guys that torture doesn't work, not only it's inhuman, but it doesn't work because the person being tortured would tell you whatever you want to hear just to make the torture stop. And I've covered this topic multiple times on my blog and also on my YouTube channel with folks such as Mark Rossini and John Kiriakou, and they both agreed with me. And we also know for sure that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed provided false information to the interrogators, such as that Al-Qaeda had nuclear weapons, and of course, they had none. And we also know that he gave incomplete information. For instance, he hadn't said anything about where Osama bin Laden was hiding. And also, he didn't say anything in 2003 about the attack in Madrid. And of course, he knew about it because he was a high-ranking Al-Qaeda affiliate. Having said that, I would say that it's practical to believe that what he says about his role in the planning is correct, because if we remove this piece from the puzzle, then we have a hole in the puzzle because we don't have another mastermind. Because if you think about it, the only other alternative option that we have is by a guy by the name of Nasir al-Waishi, if I remember well, that and his account was published by the newsletter of Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula, I think 8 years ago or something like that, in which he claimed that he proposed to bin Laden to use civil airplanes as missiles after reading about the Egyptair Flight 900, in which the co-pilot crashed the plane into the sea. Actually, this story doesn't add up for multiple reasons, one of which being that his account tells events that happen much after Khalid Sheikh Mohammed mentioned using planes to bin Laden, when the plan of 9/11 was already rolling. So the only alternative option that we have doesn't really add up. So I think that it's practical to believe that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was right, because otherwise we have a missing piece here. And I also think that what's important to remember is that Al-Qaeda journalist that you mentioned, a guy by the name of Yosri Fouda or something like that, I'm not sure I pronounced it right, interviewed Khalid Sheikh Mohammed when he was a free man. And what he says there totally frames with everything else that we know about 9/11. And for instance, even if it's not strictly related with what we're discussing right now, he explained the reason why 9/11 was picked. The reason being that 9 and 1 are the numbers that are most similar when written in our alphabet or in Arabic numbers. And also that in American English, you guys, well, I'm Italian, so I can say you guys, use the Middle Endian format. Therefore, it's month, day, and Arabic is written from right to left. Therefore, 9/11 would have been impossible to mistake for an Arabic reading it in Arabic or in American English. Therefore, I mean, putting all these pieces together, I think that the account he gave is at a high level reliable. So I think that it's more practical to think that he really was the mastermind of 9/11.
All right, and let me, we're winding down here. Let me get your thoughts on the following. I'll throw more meat into the cage and you have a tug at it. And that is the following. With the latest revelations by the Guantanamo pretrial hearings regarding this plea deal, that the United States government is basically willing to take the death penalty off the table in return for a full admission to the 9/11 attacks. And that is between the following three, and that is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Mustafa al-Hawsawi, and not Amr al-Baluchi, not Ramzi bin al-Shib. What am I missing here? Oh, Khalid, Wali bin Atash, Khalid. So those three. Their lawyers are basically saying, we will agree to this deal. But the prosecution, the government, is basically saying, no, we want this to basically, and this is on what the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, is saying, that he's overriding the court's decision to bring out this plea deal. But the prosecution is also saying that we don't want to go through this deal, we want a trial. So, all right, let's start with Sean. Sean, Are we going to see a trial? Are we going to see a plea deal sooner than we think? And is this the right call? And that's the question I have for you, Sean, and for you, Leo. Sean, you're first.
Very little surprises me anymore. Who knows? It doesn't seem to be in anyone's best interest to have a trial, because having a trial means more information gets out. And we've already seen, just from like under the Joe Biden administration, where more documents related to the investigation were released. And what we saw was that there's little nuggets in the information that suggest that what is literally a conspiracy, what is literally state sponsorship confirmed, and a conspiracy to cover it up on the part of the Americans. So I don't think it's in anyone's best interest for more information to come out, because it's already very ugly as it is. And if folks had even more information to work with, perhaps it would be the final nail, and folks would actually be held responsible, because there's certainly a number of Americans and there's a number of people in other countries that they appear to be, they're not Al-Qaeda, but they appear to be involved with a cover-up and possibly some sort of other mechanism that assists or is parallel with the actual terror operation. And so for more information to come out, it's risky. Then again, maybe there is nothing. Maybe there isn't anything else that's going to come out that's a problem. Maybe the conspiracy is just that the Americans were embarrassed and they were trying to hide the fact that they failed so badly. That could be a motivation as well. But with the way it just sort of stays in limbo for 23 years, I don't have my hopes up.
Right. Let me ask a follow-up question real quick, Sean. You brought up a point about information that was under the Biden administration that was released. It was Executive Order 14040, which was Operation Encore. Then you had the Counter-Strike document, which is, I think, the most damning document of all. Were you disappointed, or did you expect the lack of coverage from alt media regarding this, or in the media in general?
Not shocked at all, because people have already forgotten about 9/11. They're more concerned with that health crisis and their pet identitarian politics and stuff. If more folks at least in the American culture were concerned with 9/11, I'm sure that the social media and the political and cultural environment would look different, if you get me. It would not look the way that it looks today if folks were more concerned with that. So it's not something that anyone wants to mess with, because they're too busy with their pet projects and their cults.
Leo.
Well, I think I'm totally with Sean about the fact that nothing surprises me anymore, and it's very hard to predict. The only thing I would like to add to what Sean said is that these guys have nothing to lose, and we know that they are ready to die for their ideals. So I'm not sure that pleading guilty would make much sense, because that would be like a defeat in their mindset, in their worldview. So I think that we have like 30% chance of seeing a trial. And to answer your second question, my surprise that the media gave that no attention about the executive order by President Biden. To be honest, I am. I'm not American, so probably I have a different view from you guys. And I don't know. I think the 9/11 is still a big event in the American history. It's one of those 3 days that changed the world forever. The other ones being the murder of JFK and the attack on Pearl Harbor. So I would have thought that something would have surfaced on the news, and that never happened. Let me tell you something. At the beginning of last year, the news on the first state-owned television in Italy, Rai Uno, aired a video according to which Qatar bribed the Afghans not to fight the Taliban. I'm not sure if that happened or not, but what I can tell you is that video was so badly done and so badly researched that, to me, it has no credibility at all. I tried investigating that with the author of that report, and I talked to the guy, and I found out he was like living on his own planet, saying things that just didn't add up. So if Rai Uno gave credit to that guy, I wonder how come they didn't cover the release of these documents.
Now, let me ask you a follow-up like I did with Sean regarding Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the death penalty. That's true because I remember earlier on, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed wanted to plead guilty to everything and had the death penalty, which would make him a martyr. That was the whole point. So, Leo, here's my question. What changed? Why are they now saying that they'll plead guilty without the death penalty on the table?
Not sure we should be. You're asking me to be a mind reader here.
I'm
No
asking
clue.
the hard questions, yes.
No clue, really. I think that the hypothesis of being a martyr is actually that fascinates them. Or maybe their lawyers, they receive these suggestions from their lawyers. We'll never know for sure, Adam, to be honest. I don't know. It might also be just a change of mind because people change their minds.
True enough. All right, Sean, where can people reach you at and what projects are you coming up on?
Oh, sure. You can find me on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on some of the lesser known social medias as well, like VK. I have a YouTube and Odyssey channel as well as Rumble, and I have a WordPress, Contentious Ground. I do a podcast, Beyond Ground Zero, with Darren Harvey. And so you can connect with me on Twitter. My handle is SKRussellAK. And I'm just under my real name. So you just search Sean Russell. And I'm popping up on all those different spots. I post things differently on different platforms. So it's not the same content everywhere I go. But wherever you're at, I'm there.
Leo.
Well, I have a blog which is mostly in Italian. It's called Undicisettembre, that's been there for 18 years now. That is all about 9/11. Then I have a YouTube channel that you can find searching for my name, Leonardo Salvaggio, in which sometimes I cover 9/11. I think it's most covered topic. It's not the only one. For instance, next week I'll make a video about the P. Diddy case with a former NYPD homicide detective, and I'll be back to discussing 9/11 on the channel as well, and I'll talk to a person who's one of the founders of the DHS. And
Okay.
I'm also on all social media. Just Google my name.
Yeah, and we were supposed to have Darren Harvey here, the other half of Beyond Ground Zero with Sean Russell, but on the last second he couldn't. He had family plans. Damn real life. Nevertheless, we would like to do more future episodes with you, Sean. And Leo brought up a very good point, succinct point about collaborating with like-minded individuals and people who aren't like-minded. We're investigative reporters. We're not here for a cult-like mentality that Sean brought up earlier about what's wrong with the skeptics and debunkers. Leo had a lot of experience in regarding the trivialities and the arguments thereof. We are not in the same mindset, us three here. We're basically investigative reporters. We independently react. We don't cater to a group. We work independently from each other, but we work very well when we're meshing well with one another. We've also brought up different ideas and thoughts that I haven't heard of, and I got from Sean and Leo over the years as well. But in the future, I would like to do more collab episodes with other people, Sean. Well, I thank you very much for coming on today, very much. And, I'd like to do more future episodes with you in the future with Leo as well.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm always interested in discussing these matters.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to next time, surely.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Hey, listen, happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. Thank you for watching in, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.